It is June 13th at 5:30, and this is the regular meeting of the SVUESD, and I'm thrilled to see so many people here. This is really nice. So we have there are a few agenda items that I would like to add prior to us moving forward post the agenda. Want to add at the tail end an executive session for two reasons. One would be an executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1D, which regards grievances other than tax grievances, and then executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3, which has to do with the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, provided that the body shall make a final decision to hire or appoint a public officer or employee in an open meeting, and shall explain the reason for its final decision during the open meeting. So I would entertain a motion to add those two executive sessions to the posted agenda, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Scott. Can I have a second, please? Thanks. We'll call it Glenn. Any discussion about adding the executive sessions? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding the executive sessions, please signify saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Okay. Any abstentions or any no votes? Okay, very good. So those have been added to the tail end. We also need to have a discussion about our school choice practice, and I would entertain a motion to add that to the agenda in lieu of a principal's report tonight, please.
I'll make that motion to add it.
Thank you. We have a first from Jeff. Do we have a second on adding that agenda item?
Second.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Any discussion about adding that? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding a discussion of school choice to in lieu of a superintendent's, in lieu of a principal's report, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any abstentions? Any no votes? Okay, that passes as well. So that brings us to our agenda. The first item for which is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I invite anyone who wishes to stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the next item is public comment, and I would like to offer a bit of a preamble to public comment, since I'm guessing what most of you might be here to discuss. So I know I've received, I think, 6 emails in total. I know other board members have also received emails about the continued use of an SRO at Shaftesbury. So I put this out there as this might pertain to what a lot of you wish to talk about tonight. I responded with a version of this to every email that I've received, and I'll just say the same thing. So this board has had no conversation about employing private security at any of our schools. This board has had no conversation about doing away with the line item that has been on the budget for the last 5 years. There's currently many thousands of dollars earmarked for SROs. There's been no conversation about replacing the deputy who's stationed there as the SRO. There has been some, although I understand it may be made formal tonight, there's been only informal murmurings about the sheriff's department potentially asking for a 44% increase in what it costs to have that SRO at Shaftesbury. If that is made, then that is something this board will need to undertake. But I think the public statement that the deputy was being fired and everyone should send emails in his defense, I think was ill-timed. It did not accurately reflect anything that this board has discussed. So I just put that out there, and if folks wish now to make public comment regarding that or anything else, the floor is yours. I would ask that if you could stand, please identify yourself by your name and the town in which you live, and share your thoughts, please.
I'll go first. Hello, I'm Andrew Hunt. I live in the town of Shaftesbury. I do reside in the Parent Acres neighborhood, so we are part of the North Bennington School District. And I'm here to talk about the item that's been added to the agenda, which is school choice. I currently have a child in first grade, going into second grade at Shaftesbury. And we applied for our daughter, who is getting ready to go into kindergarten, to attend Shaftesbury along with her brother. We received a denial letter in response to our application. And so I've appealed to the board. I don't know if everybody here received my initial email, but I sent a letter of appeal back in April requesting that our case be reviewed and the reasons why. And also doing my due diligence, I did do some research in reference to siblings attending school together and the benefits that go along with that. And just a couple of things. So the University of Essex found positive spillover effect, meaning that the children benefit from the positive influence of their sibling in the same school. And as far as their academics go, promotes positive mental health, mental well-being and academics amongst the siblings while they're going to school together. Separately, if the children are separated in schools, separated between schools, it has shown to have a negative impact on their mental health, as well as their experiences in academics in the school. And I will just, I know we had talked, Chris, when I first sent in the appeal letter, so we were talking about the appeal process, and it sounded like some of the board members didn't know about the appeal process. So I did also print off policy number 5705, which is from the SVSU website, in reference to Shasbury School specifically, and non-resident tuition students. And in section A and subsection 6, it talks about the appeal process, and that within 10 days of receiving the denial, we have the ability to appeal, which will then be heard by the board and a response within 30 days of the request to appeal. I won't complain that it's been 50 days now, but at least we're here and talking, and that's the positive thing. So, part of the reasoning specifically for us, like my wife and I, who's here with me, we talked, if this was our first child going into Shasbury and we got denied, so be it, we understand. The fact that having two children now potentially being split amongst two different schools, I work out of state, long hours, 6 in the morning, 6 at night, so I'm not here for drop off or pickup. My wife is self-employed. We rely heavily on my mother-in-law, who is Karen Aiken, and she is one of the primary substitutes. She's a retired educator from Shasbury, but she primarily substitutes at Shasbury. She is our primary person to pick up the kids and do what needs to be done until Sarah can get home from work. So having her at Shasbury and then having to worry about ending her duties, packing up our son, getting to North Bennington would severely delay pickup for our daughter, which we have no other ability to do so, especially when I'm at work and she's at work. So again, I just ask for your consideration in reference to our appeal. I appreciate you guys letting me come and speak, and look forward to hearing your decision.
Liz Duffy, I'm in Shasbury. I just wanted to, it sounds like thank you to the chair for explaining the SRO situation a bit more detail. Obviously, there's a lot of misinformation that had been going around the internet. But I wanted to just show my support for the SRO program. Officer Franklin has been especially wonderful with the kids. It's been a really positive experience for the Shasbury community. So I hope that even if there is an increase in the cost that the program would incur with the district, that it's still considered that we move forward and either vote on it as a community, or it's just considered if there is a cost increase. I can't say how many positive things have come of that program with our children. A lot of other children in the school have experienced. I know my daughter said specifically what happens if Officer Franklin isn't there next year or the year after. Who's going to do Flag Friday? That was her first thing. And who's going to, dance and directing traffic. I don't know if anyone's been by Shasbury in the morning or afternoon, but he's our dancing SRO officer. But it's been really positive, and he's a part of the community. So we just kind of wanted to come and show our support for the program in general. So if it comes to a budget decision, there are a lot of folks at Shasbury, I think probably in the greater SVSU community, that would be in favor of either budget increases or just talking about this. So thanks.
Thank you.
I mean, I agree with everything that's said. That's why we're here.
Right.
To support Officer Franklin.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Munley, and I'm from Bennington Cares. And I don't quite know the procedure, so if you help me with this.
Sure.
I have some requests for information, and I'm wondering if those are appropriate to do here, or if I need to be directed someplace else. I have some requests for information about the financial report that was in the packet. And I also have some about 2 of the policies that are under consideration tonight. One of them related to transportation, which I guess is being warned at this one, and the other about homeless children in the school system?
So generally speaking, public comments is different than a public question and answer period.
Right.
Primarily, and here's the reason for that, it's not necessarily to just throw up stone walls, it's the purpose of that is to the best of our ability, create as much notice for members of the public as possible to know what's going to be discussed, so people who have an interest can then come in. And if public comment turns into a question and answer, then potentially we could be accused of trying to withhold stuff or trying to limit public access to that. So what I would ask is this: if you, Mary Ellen, if you and I want to chat about policies, I can do my best to answer those for you. But I would say the policy committee meets the first Monday of every month. Those are open meetings as well, just that it's a public body, just like this is. It's the policy committee of the SVSU in total. If you have specific questions about the financial reports, my gut reaction is to say, let's ask the superintendent about that, about who he would want those questions to go to. So does that answer your question?
It's
Okay.
very helpful.
Okay.
And if I just give you a call tomorrow, something that you know.
Yeah, and if you need to split before this meeting's over, then let's do that. Otherwise, we'll get you every else.
Okay, terrific.
And Jim, if somebody does have a request, I mean, part falls with the Freedom of Information Act, they can just submit it to the district and you do your best to answer those requests.
It's all public information anyway, so it wouldn't really have to do Freedom of Information Act, just have to request
So you
it.
do have that access to questions.
And in fact, there is a policy, and I'm going to see if I can lay my eyes on it right now, that specifies the process for how to make those requests. It's in the policies, and I don't know.
Then I'll
if
look
it's
for it.
in my eyes on it right now. Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Anyone else for public comments? Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm Tanya Andrew. I'm from Shaftesbury as well. My question is more about, I know we've increased to have more SRO officers across the district, but I don't know what that looks like. So when will we get information about how you're using that money and what it looks like in each school?
So I'm gonna use the chair's prerogative. I'm gonna answer that only because it's something we've talked about many times in other meetings past. I don't feel like I'm breaking any new ground. So that's why I'm answering your question and not your question, Mary Ellen. So there has been, it's a matter of being able to staff. So the three schools that are located in the town of Bennington would need, the SRO position would need to be staffed by a Bennington police officer, and there's simply not the officers to do that. In terms of filling the slots for the three schools that are not within Bennington, those need to be filled by deputy sheriffs. And again, it comes down to a matter of people to fill those positions. So the money has remained in the budget, the money has remained earmarked. Much of it has gone unspent every year because there's nobody to pay to do those positions. The only position that's been, I don't think there's been a vacancy in the Shaftesbury SRO since the merger of the boards. I can't speak to what happens before. Powell doesn't have one right now. Yep.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time with your answer
Okay.
because, you know, Bennington Elementary School, we've read all the articles, we know how rough it is, we see in the paper all of the arrests. And we've identified that the school needs to do better about keeping it more civilized. There's a lot of needs, you recognize it, you allocated money for it, but why is there not any problem solving into making it better?
So I think because we've talked about this in meetings past, I feel comfortable trying to offer an answer that's satisfactory for you. One element of that is that the function of the SRO has less to do with like law enforcement and keeping order in the schools and more about building positive connections within communities. So I think that is one misperception about the SRO program in total. Like the idea is that it's security in the building, and that's not the chief function. I don't even know that it's a secondary or tertiary function. Sure, maybe there is some security measure built into having a law enforcement officer there. That's not truly what the research shows, and it's certainly not what the concept is about. But in terms of other efforts to improve the situation and improve the climate of NL, I think that's a thing this board talks about pretty regularly. And so we've talked about the inclusion of not only more teachers and more paras, but we have student support services workers, and we have school-based clinicians, and we have behaviorists, and we have lots of different types of supports in the school, in all of our elementary schools, since you asked about elementary specifically. And in recent months, with a change in administration has come a different approach, which has also decreased the number of behavioral incidents in the school. So I think this board and the staff at Benel are doing a lot to try to improve that. There is a recognition that there are still problems there. The SRO position isn't necessarily the answer to that, and even if it was, this board can't control how many police officers Bennington Police Department has.
So you don't feel the need to locate and identify other resources when there's uncivilized, school operation is essentially disrupted at times.
At times, sure, and I would say in all the schools, at times there are disruptions to the instructions being given. But I don't think it's accurate to say that either this board or Benel has not been seeking alternative solutions. I think we absolutely have.
What are they?
I'll say it again. So it includes having more staff in the building, which are teachers, paras, behaviorists, social workers, all of those different supports to help identify needs in the different areas of a child's life that sort of manifest as problematic behavior in school. We also have thanks to some community-based organizations that have started to work there. Mary Ellen is a representative of one of them. So the after-school activities that have been hosted by Bennington Cares, I think, has also gone a long way to help things. So are all the problems solved? No, absolutely not. But are things improving? Definitely. And does this board continue to be dedicated to seeking out alternatives and solutions? Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Mary Ellen.
No question now, just something to comment about. And we just want to say it's not, what I'm going to tell you is not related to thinking that there's not a need for other services in the school. But I do want to report on the after-school program that Bennington Cares has just completed. The enrollment for the 3 classes that were offered surprised everyone. There were about 70 children who enrolled for those classes, and about 60 of them actually completed all 5 weeks. And that was really a bonus. And we can't say more about how wonderful the principal was in inviting us into the school, making certain that there was a coordinator who worked directly with Julie Howe, who was our liaison, and that teachers in the school came forward, and we had a lot of support in each of the after-school programs that also made a great difference. The kids were fabulous. There were very, very few any behavioral problems. It was a joy to be in those groups with those kids, and the best we could tell, they had a great time. So the other thing that is really pleasing about it is that we hear from some of the teachers, in fact, the coordinator, that Benel is now planning to have a full set of after-school programs next school year, almost every day of the week. And so it's just been a really wonderful experience, and want to make sure that you guys know how great the people at the school were in making this happen, and how cool the kids are.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else for public comment? Hi.
I'm Stephanie Mulligan. I am a Shasbury resident and also sit on the Mount Anthony School Board, so I just want to say that. So I have 2 comments, or 1 question and a comment. The first comment I have is I understand that when I first heard about Officer Frank, when I went and I pulled the budget, the documents from the budget meetings from the ed meetings, and there was a highlighted, like the MAU and this district, we rely on highlighted information from a budget, like from a line by line budget, because there's a lot going on in it, and that we rely on the administrators to do that. This was actually a highlighted item in that budgetary process. And so speaking from just another board member who is starting to realize, like these in the finance committee meetings, like the asking questions at that moment is important. And I just want to make a statement that that I think in the future, we probably need to dig deeper into some of these highlighted line items in order to really get an understanding. So when we're sitting in a group, we're not responding to saying things like, this is the first we've heard about it, or we don't, because I mean, really, like some of the conversation, regardless of the rate increase, some of the conversation actually started at the budgetary process. And my question to the board with respect to that is, were we budgeting $50,000 for school location? So we have 3 schools in the Bennington location, Woodford, Pownell, and Shasberry. And I understand that the 3 in Bennington rely on the police department in Bennington, but the outliers don't. And so if was there $50,000 designated for each location? Or was there a plan discussed on how we would allocate that through that $100,000 that was highlighted in the budget process? So that's kind of like, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying this in an accusatory way. It's more like I'm reflecting and looking back, like I know where to find the documents, and so my next question is as a parent. So as a parent, I'm in Shasberry, and we are very close to the state police barracks, right? And I understand that the SRO's job is not to be the first line of defense in the event of some sort of catastrophe, right? But he is an officer and he has a gun, right? In the event of an actual incident, has the state police walked through the Shasberry building? Because it feels to me like, I guess I'd like to know the answer, because it feels to me that we rely heavily on the engagement of the Bennington PD, but yet we're outliers, Shasberry, Pownell, or wherever, we're outliers in the planning event. So I would like to know, can we have the state police walk through the building as well? So those are my.
So Stephanie, again, keeping in mind.
Yeah, I don't expect, I know that.
What I would throw out just is this, as a way of frankly not answering your question.
Yes, that's fine.
Is that one of the things that executive session provides for is a recognition that talking about specific crisis response plans in open session is not good. It does not help those. So I don't know that I even would answer that question about what the state police has done.
So I'm
and again,
asking for tactical information. I physically, like any child who, like when the high school, for instance, the high school had like a drill with police in the building, right? A couple of years ago, like as practice, like,
Sure.
like, so if I'm not asking for tactical, I'm just asking, like, literally, does the state police know the layout of our building and are they equipped to respond? I don't want to know where they're going to be. I don't want to know anything. I just want to know that they are aware. It's my understanding they've been in Arlington. I just want to know that whether they're going to be in Shasta, whether they have access to the information they might need in the event of an emergency.
So I think that brings us into a realm of stuff that we haven't previously spoken about, so I don't feel like I can answer that, but it's
I just
out there, and I think,
posing
and it's worth for us to keep in mind, for sure. So thanks, Sarah. Okay, well, thank you for such a robust period of public comment.
Chris, you do have some people who may be listening at home on
Okay.
Zoom. So if they did want to address public comment, because of security purposes, we can't see you unless you go to the reaction button down at the bottom and raise your hand under the reaction button, and then I could unmute you if you had a public comment. Okay, got the one. And
Superintendent Culkey, you're able to make that happen this time.
right, this, yeah. Megan?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yep, Megan, state your name so the recorder can get it.
Yep, this is Megan Gunn. I'm a parent of 2 children at Shasberry Elementary, and I'm also a pediatrician in town at the hospital. I missed the first 5 minutes, so I apologize if any of this has already been gone over, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person. But I've heard a little bit since then, and I just wanted to give my comments on the role of the school resource officer at Shasberry Elementary. Not only the role, but the person themselves, Officer Franklin. And like you've kind of alluded to, he is not just there for security. He provides so much more than that to our children. I think he does provide a sense of security to our children from speaking to my kids and some other parents in the community. He also is a good role model for them to see, an adult that to them is like a policeman walking around. That's a safe person for them to go to. It teaches them and shows them that policemen are safe people. He also, as pointed out by my very sweet and well-meaning 7-year-old, she pointed out that she thinks he is the only person of color that is a teacher, as she called him, at their school. And so it was interesting to me that she found that to be another important factor, and also that he's in a leadership role. And then he also will spend spend time with the kids. He is someone they can go to. I know he does some kind of not formal teaching, but does something called Flag Fridays that they learn from. So I think yourself, you kind of pointed out that he does much more than that. And I know there's not many school resource officers in the state, I believe, but I think he specifically plays such a pivotal role and is more than just security. So for bringing in security, I don't think that really replaces the roles that he is and has been functioning in as a school resource officer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Nikki, I'm asking you to unmute yourself, identify yourself. Try that again.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Again now, yes.
Hi, my name is Nikki. I'm a Shasberry parent as well. I just wanted to also speak about Officer Franklin's role. I agree with the last person who spoke that, a security officer isn't going to necessarily be able to replace everything that Officer Franklin has offered to our children, especially in terms of building a really meaningful relationship at a really young age with a police officer. And I think that that is so important, especially, right now, in the times we're in, for kids to learn to feel really comfortable with police and be able to have fun with them and feel safe with them and feel like they are there to protect them and, be a source throughout their day. When I read what is going on and the possibility that he might not be there, the first thing that came to my mind is the fact that every day when I pull up, the first thing my daughter says is, "There's Officer Franklin. Can you roll down my window?" And I want to say hi and I want to wave to him while he's dancing. And if he's not there, the first thing out of her mouth is, "Where's Officer Franklin? I hope he's okay." So I think, he's such a positive person in the community. He's not just an officer there. He's really part of the Shasberry community and the overall education of the students there.
Thank you very much.
That's it for hands so far.
Carry on. Yep.
Yeah, I realize now that I have a comment related to one of the policies, not a question. And that is, it's the policy about homeless students.
Okay.
And I noticed in the financials that there was no money allocated this year for transportation related for homeless students. And the policy does say that there will be transportation available to homeless students. And so my comment is first to recognize that, and knowing what's going to be happening in the next couple of months. This budget finishes at the end of June, right? And there's a new one. I'm hoping that in the next year's budget, if there isn't already, that there is in fact allocation of monies for the transportation of homeless children in our school district.
Okay, so that brings, I'm going to call it into public comment. Again, thank you folks for being willing to come and share your points of view. You're always welcome, so thank you very much. That brings us to the third agenda item, which is the consent agenda, which was attached. There were 2 sets of minutes to approve, 2 resignations, and then a number of 7 nominations for different positions. First off, are there any proposed alterations to either sets of minutes, either from June 5th or from May 9th? Very good. In that case, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as published, please.
Chris, do you want to do 6G separately or do you the nominations?
Well, Superintendent Coltina, would you think that would be proper given that position?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll address it separately.
Great. So in that case, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 as published, and 6 inclusive minus 6G. Entertain that motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Scott.
I was second.
Thank you, Joe. Any discussion about approving the consent agenda as described? Hearing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any no votes? Thank you very much for coming. Very good. In that case,
Would you
Superintendent,
like me to address consent agenda?
if you would, please.
Yes. This is concerning the Molly Stark principal search. We had 5 applications. There were 3 identified qualified candidates chosen for interview by the screening committee. That was made up of teachers from Molly Stark, principal of Palmer Elementary School, the director of early childhood education, the director of human resources. They forwarded 2 finalists to me, and those 2 finalists were interviewed by all directors, the board chair, the superintendent, and the assistant superintendent. Those interviews were conducted May 30th, and on that committee was the director of student services, director of curriculum, instruction assessment, director of facilities, director of finance, director of early childhood education, director of human resources, assistant superintendent, and aforementioned chair. So the finalist that I am nominating to the board this evening is the current acting principal, former vice principal of Molly Stark, Terry Kilroy.
So let's open the floor. Any board members have questions of the superintendent? I spoke to work with me since I was there too. Okay. Other than that, I'll just add that I was very pleased with this choice, with this nomination from the superintendent. Acting principal Hillary, I had not yet met him, but I was quite taken with his presentation. He has a clear passion for working with kids, as a point of view and a perspective that I don't know that I've seen in an elementary school principal before. In that, just seems to I imagine the kids very easily attach and have a good rapport with him. So
He's been there all year, right?
he's been there. He previously working in the function of assistant principal. Yep. So yeah, so I give my full support behind this. So if there are no other questions or statements to be made, I would entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 6G, please. So moved. Thank you. First, do we have a second on that? Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving consent agenda item 6G, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion carries. Thank you very much. So this brings us to policies, agenda item number 4. There are a number of which we need to warn, which is, for those of you in attendance who might not know, that the process of approving policies is twofold. The policy committee, the SVSU policy committee drafts policy, and then it gets circulated to each of the member boards. First to warn, which sort of gives everyone the heads up that, hey, this is a thing that might become policy, take a read, give it some thought, come back. And then our second step is to adopt it. Once all of the constituent boards adopt the policy, it goes back to the SVSU policy committee, and ta-da, it's a new policy. That's how it works. So we have 5 to warn, all of which are posted in the agenda. We have 2 of which are required by the Agency of Education. That's draft policy 2401, which is the access control and visitor management, coming in and out of buildings. The other draft policy required by the Agency of Education is the fire and emergency preparedness drills policy, which is draft policy number 2470. Then we have additional ones which regard transportation, draft policy 3100, draft policy 4001, which is the harassment of employees, and then draft policy 4003, which is the bullying prevention of adults. So I'll just start by opening up the floor. Are there any questions about any of those first 5 policies that we need to warn tonight?
Just questions, not discussion.
Sure. Okay.
When we get to the discussion.
Okay. So hearing no questions, I would entertain a motion to warn those first 5 policies that are listed in the agenda, please.
So I'll make the motion to warn policies listed under A, B, C, D, and E.
Thank you very much. Jeff, do we have a second for that? No second. Excellent. All right, so we have a first and a second. Sandy, would you like to lead the discussion on these draft policies?
Thank you. On 2401, I'm asking that on line 22, that after the word district, we end the sentence.
2401, line 2.
22,
22, thank you. That makes more sense. After, say that again, please.
after the word district, ending the sentence.
Okay. Are you asking that we take out, that we omit the electronic identification access bit?
Yes, because I don't believe all of our schools have the
Superintendent Kilkeen, can you comment on that?
Other than this is model policy that we did not draft and were given by the state that we have to adopt it as is.
So AOE says, so specifically when AOE requires a policy, they require their language for the policy.
Yes, that is my understanding.
So this is what, I'm making note of this, Sandy, what I'd like to do is to bring this to Chairperson Johnson, who leads the policy committee.
I recommend it goes. Yeah, but here's the timeline. If you don't, I ask that you warn this tonight, because it has to be enacted by the start of school. So we meet in August, which is when you would adopt it. You can warn it and always amend it, change it. But if you don't warn it tonight, you won't meet the 2 times to address this.
Fair enough?
As long as we come back to it.
Yep.
It'll be back on your August agenda for adoption.
Anything else on that one?
Not on that one, no.
Thank you. Any other discussion you have on the first 5
Yeah.
draft policy? Fire away.
So I asked that on policy 2470, if someone could share with me the difference between fire and emergency prepared drill and an options-based response drill, which is under the definition. It seems as though they might be 2 different things to me in my perception, and I could be absolutely wrong.
So since this is another of those AOE required ones, if we could, what I'd like to do is to warn it tonight. I'll fire the question off to Leon, see if he has any.
I was going to address this on my report, but I can address what an option-based response is.
Sure, thank you.
So the Vermont School Crisis Planning Team has been strongly encouraging schools and school districts to move away from the traditional lockdown approach to an active shooter. During the months of September of 22, November of 22, and January of 23, schools were required to conduct options-based response drills where faculty, staff, and students demonstrated their ability to respond to different types of situations, to limit the anxiety associated with these drills and ensure that these drills were conducted in a safe and effective manner. These drills must be announced immediately prior to the drill being conducted, so it's not a surprise type drill that's including run, hide, and fight. So different options than just lockdown, shelter in place. That's what the option-based response training is.
That doesn't quite answer the question I have. The policy is called the fire and emergency prepared drill. And so in the definition of the options-based, I understand that it's to help students to reduce the anxiety for the possible formerly called the clear the halls drill. And I'm wondering about the school egress, the regular fire evacuation drill, if that's different, the same, or if it's combined.
So you asked if they're 2 separate
I think
addresses or, because I mean, I guess everything would,
if it changed the name of the policy, I think that it would be
It is not our policy name, it's the state policy.
state policy.
so we just need clarification if it's
So the
same
definition,
policy with 2 different.
So we have a schedule by the state from when we have to do these drills. September is an option-based drill, October is November, December is either egress or relocation drill. January option-based, February either egress or relocation. Egress is a fire drill. April either egress or relocation. June either replace egress or relocation. Egress is the complete evacuation of the school. First 2 drills are in September, October. We follow a schedule that's dictated by the state.
So there's egress, which is the old fire drills,
yes,
and the evacuation would be the.
There might be other reasons why you have to egress the building, so they're
So there's a
moving away from.
single terms.
Right, correct.
that I asked that we just come back to. I understand that there's a time crunch. I believe that perhaps the policy title may need to not say it's a fire drill if it's not, or that maybe includes option-based as well as the fire or egress?
I know our lawyer is often, our lawyer, that, you know, the school.
These have been sent to Dina
Okay.
prior to tonight's meeting.
So do you happen to know, Superintendent Kilkeen, has Dina weighed in as to whether or not we have the flexibility to change titles of policy? I would imagine not,
I
but,
can ask her, but that wasn't a question yet.
so, but I've taken those down, Sandy. What I'll do is run those by, Chairperson Johnson of the policy committee and see what he has to say. Any other conversation on 2470? Any other conversation on any of the other 5 draft policies? Okay, fire away. Go ahead, go for it.
So in the transportation policy 3100. Something. hold on. Oh. Just on page 3, on line 6, we switched from contractor to bus company. So if we could just stay consistent and if it's contractor, it's contractor, unless there's a reason it has bus company or contractor. It's line 6, page 3. And I'm wondering if, and it is a question, if there are different expectations for each school when children ride a bus, it should be line 14. And if there is, can we come up with one set of expectations for all of our students?
So that feels more like something that'll be addressed in administrative regulations than in policy language itself.
Okay.
Like to reflect grade level.
It's made a rubric for the bus drivers to follow, and it looks like.
So any other discussion on the 5 draft policies that are?
There's also other sites that have transportation that aren't schools that would have different behavior
Contracted.
restrictions here.
That's
Okay, so with those under advisement, understand that we get another bite at this apple, we bring them back to warn, or bring them back to adopt rather. By warning them now, as the superintendent outlined, we can follow the timeline that we need to follow. So I would entertain a motion to warn those 5 draft policies as discussed. Thanks. Have a second on that, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jeff. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion about warning these 5 draft policies? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor of warning these 5 draft policies, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And that motion carries. That brings us then to 3 that we are being asked to adopt. It's draft policy 5008, draft policy 5050, and draft policy 5085. So first off, are there any questions regarding those before we move into any kind of motions to adopt? Okay, so hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt these 3 policies, please.
I'll make a motion to adopt the 3 F, G, and H
Thank you,
policies.
I'll say. Thanks. All right, great. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion about these?
And I think Jim can always clarify this. For Mary Ellen, I think she talked about transportation for homelessness. I think that falls under SVSU. It's a line, it's the budget and that, right? For the SVSU,
I can assure you we have provided transportation for homeless students.
so there's people that live outside this district.
And sometimes, especially under the Community Act, if sometimes are sharing that with other school districts, depending where the original setting district is, so.
There is money there.
Yep.
It's not in the elementary budget.
No, transportation is in the SU budget.
Okay.
So, on 5008, I would ask that before we adopt it, that we strike letter B completely. I feel it's probably already mentioned in line 30C, and I think that B is a bit insensitive.
So page 1, line 28, to include 29. So you said living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, or camping grounds due to the lack of alternative accommodations. suggesting we strike that.
Yes.
Chriselle, what are your thoughts?
I agree with it. I agree with what Sandy's saying. It's not the language specifically with motels, hotels, trailer parks and camping grounds. It just seems a little bit insensitive and marginalized
Okay.
in a way. Because, we do live in Vermont and there are people who, that's how their lifestyle is essentially.
I would raise a point that excluding the language has the possibility of excluding someone in that particular living situation. I'm not adverse to changing the language, maybe combining the two, but I see that there could be a negative connotation there as well. I don't know who has access to a bus list, whether a student, whatever their pickup is, but I think that this might need a little fine tuning.
Well, I think C kind of covers that transitional.
I think in this context, shelters is a very specific meaning though, that doesn't cover motels,
Because
hotels.
yes, some people who rent rooms, hotels, and motels. I don't know what if we put something, it's like alternative living. But you have kids there, it doesn't address kids who are hopping house to house to house.
It does, because it says lacking a fixed regular shelter than regular.
So,
Go ahead, Scott.
well, I guess, so it starts off by saying homeless students means those lacking fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, which could include. I understand the insensitivity of the word, well, let's use trailer parks, for example, because you wouldn't want somebody who does live in a trailer park, has a home over their head and is very comfortable to feel that way. However, it's qualified by the opening statement, which is those lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So it's somebody living in any of those places in a temporary manner that which is why it's how it's spelled out. It's not saying if somebody's living in those places, they're homeless.
It's saying that while living in those places, if one's residence in those places is not fixed, regular, or adequate. Correct. Then it
And if
becomes.
we zoom out from this, we're covering all the bases by providing transportation to every student, no matter where they reside, whether it be temporary or permanent. And with no one else having access to the information other than the bus company, I don't think people are gonna file a FOIA request to find this out.
I just thought it was like much.
It's one of it could go away, but I do, if you read it the way if you read it from the start, it's not making presumptions of where somebody's living not being a home. Which is, I think, what we were worried about.
But
Yes.
why doesn't it have a house there? Because I think of trailer parks, people live in trailer parks, some nice trailer parks, and there's some not so nice trailer parks. So are we saying if you live in a trailer park, you're homeless, I think? I
don't think that's what it's saying.
Or mobile home.
Yeah, not.
I don't think it wants to say that either.
Okay.
That's why I brought it up, because
Can we do like alternative living locations? Because there are.
Living grounds.
So you can suggest changes. This looks like this is up to be adopted, which means it's already gone as written to every board, including this board, and was warned with approval. So if what you're talking about, I think we don't have to go back and rewarn things if it's like a minor change, like you want a period here or it's a word change, but something like that, if we go back, probably have to go back to the policy committee, which will not meet again until September, possibly August, but probably not till September. And if they agree to the changes that this board wants, they'll go back all out to be warned again with the changes and then back out again to be adopted again to all boards, everything from Sandgate to Arlington, and this board, MEU board, BSU board.
So right now, what we have on the floor is a Sandy, was that a formal motion to strike lines 28, 29 from page one?
yes, and then just
leave line 30.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor right now for this board to send this policy back to the policy committee, striking lines 28, 29 from page 1. Is there a second to that?
I second the
So we
motion.
have a first and a second. Any further discussion on this point that's being made? Okay, so all those in favor of, and let me back it up, we can talk about other suggestions in a moment if this motion passes, but let's take it just each of the steps at a time. All those, if there's no further discussion on the motion on the floor, all those in favor of striking lines 28, 29 from page 1, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand, please.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm opposed.
Okay.
I abstain. So Jeff Stay abstain. Stein, Lemon, abstain.
So I wasn't gonna vote because I didn't want to have to break a tie. Now we have, well, so, so,
Abstaining is technically no, though, right?
well, no, abstentions go to the majority, but there is not a majority,
Right.
so I have to vote.
Put you on the spot.
So keeping in mind that I think it's important that this board is inclusive in its practice, I also vote in favor of striking lines 20 and 29. So that motion passes. And I'm gonna suggest that this board not make an alternate recommendation on this, that instead it goes back to the policy committee and see if they want to fill anything in for what was taken about.
Who's on the policy committee for us?
But that would be. So, we'll figure it out from there. So, okay, so that is policy 5008. Any other discussion on the policies that are up for adoption tonight? Okay, so hearing none, all those, there's a motion on the floor to adopt. So we actually need a modification. So the motion on the floor is to adopt 5008, 5050, and 5085. So instead, I'm hoping that Jeff, as the person who made that motion, you will modify your motion to approve 5050 and 5085 as published and to return 5008 to the policy.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anyone want to second that new motion?
I will second that.
Thank you, Sandy. Any further discussion? Nope, I won't allow it. We're not going to have it. No. So all those in favor of the new motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that conversation. Next is agenda. One more thing about policies. At our August meeting, we are going to take a deep dive into the harassment, hazing, and bullying policy. It's a big one. There's lots there to it. There's been a board member who's been very patient for the last 2 months now, waiting for us to have the time to give it that it deserves, and we're going to make that happen in August. So look forward to it. Next is agenda item number 5. Hi, Marge. Good to see you again. Bye, thank you. Gotta spice this up. We keep losing people when we switch agenda. Okay. Agenda item number 5, we're going to make fencing instead of finance. Not really. I figured that might bring people in. So Director Gordon, I would like to turn the floor over to you, please.
Treasurer's report has not yet been posted, so we can probably table that. And then the second item is a grant that Darcy Webb at Ben Al had applied for and has received, so the board would just need to accept that on behalf. Essentially what she's looking to do is have a project this fall with 4th and 5th grade to replant bulbs on the park side street of the building, daffodils and tulips.
Okay, so we have this grant that we hope to be awarded to Bennington Elementary, but we do need to formally accept it. So I would entertain a motion to accept the grant as described by Director Gordon.
So moved.
Thanks, Scott. Good second, please. We'll call Sandy out in a second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the Garden Club grants to Ben L, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And it carries. Great. Thank you. That moves us on to operations.
Thank you. I have two quick things. I'm Holly Anderson with the operations or stuff, I don't facilities. And I have two agenda items. Both are in regard to the art ESSER funding through the bipartisan legislation that was passed under the Biden administration. We had a bid opening for the Bennington elevator, and I want to do that. And then we also bid out ventilation for the Woodford Hollow School. And I have to open that in a warned meeting with quorum. So I'm going to open it and read it. And then I'm going to scan it and send it to the state immediately, if not sooner. So this project is for the ventilation at Woodford Hollow Elementary School. The amount is $209,000, $209,820. And this is under the $250,000 threshold that the state requires about, or these funds require. Oh, for their GSK Climate Control. They're out of Manchester, Dorset area. And so this falls within the
Simplified acquisition threshold.
that.
I was wondering about that. I was wondering if it was a small one. Yeah.
So I would like to ask the board to please accept this bid. You're welcome to look at it. The bid form was put together with our engineering firm. And so that we can accept the bid, move forward with contracting and get ventilation in Woodford Hollow School this summer.
So any questions for Director Anderson about the bid?
Just to clarify for anybody in the room or online that doesn't understand ventilation, we're referring to HVAC, which includes both heat and air conditioning.
Yeah, and so the Woodford School actually has heat pumps, so they have heating and cooling. They just don't have any ventilation, so.
Okay.
So we're gonna put an ERV in the attic, and everything is, because Woodford Hollow School is a historic site, it's been run by the State Historic Office of Preservation, and they've approved our
And
plans.
just one more little clarification, ERV is
Energy recovery ventilator, so it's, it provides ventilation, and it's a very energy efficient solution.
Any other questions for Director Anderson? In that case, I would entertain a motion to accept the bid as described by Director Anderson.
second.
You're gonna first, you're gonna make that first. You're gonna make that motion.
I'm still-
No, perfect, perfect. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion about the bid? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the bid as described by Director Anderson, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye.
Best day ever. Thank you.
Opposed, any abstentions? Now it carries. Now it's the best day ever.
The second item on the agenda for operations is the Bennington Elementary School. And so we went out to bid for adding an elevator to the two-story section of the elementary school for as a number of different reasons, but mostly for COVID-related relief. We got two bids back. We had the bid opening last week that you guys were all kind enough to join for quorum. And the low bidder was Farrington Construction Company out of Shelburne, Vermont. They were at $999, $605. Thousands. So, yeah.
Cheap would be expensive there.
So we vetted both bids. We've looked at them, we've reviewed the bids with the state, and we had to take the lowest responsible bidder because the bids were not within 1% of each other. We couldn't choose one or the other. We had to choose the low bidder, so they are the low bidder for the project. So I would like to get approval to move forward with this. With the knowledge that the way we set this up, and I had a beautifully drawn picture of the elevator shaft itself, but on the outside, it's actually the exact measurements for the Fibonacci, the Fibonacci sequence. And so this is not a good representation, but basically we're going to do the masonry very similar to this. And the deduct alt from the contractor to remove that and just have it be all monolithic was $15,000. So I wanted to make the board aware of that expenditure. and make
We
sure.
didn't want it to look like a concrete shaft, so that was, but you did it as an, if it had come back significantly more expensive, the recommendation would have been not to look.
But it's not, it's gonna look very much like. So, so I wanted to
It's-
make sure, we did our due diligence.
If you're looking at the front of the building, the shaft goes all the way to the left, but in the back of that side. So if you're, the door that goes out to the playground, that's where the shaft is gonna be.
And I think aesthetics are important in our school. It can't just be an institutional setting. It needs to be pretty, it needs to be pleasant. And if there's, math to be learned from the exterior of the construction, then all the better.
More math.
Yeah, and art and beauty, like it's everywhere. Sequence is everywhere.
I was surprised that it wasn't a bigger gap. That's not a big offset.
So, great. So I would entertain a motion to approve the elementary elevator project bid as described by Director Anderson, please. So, thank you. Scott, we have a second, please? Very good. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Now the motion carries.
Best day ever twice. Thank you very much. And I'm gonna go get this to the state, and I apologize for leaving. It's my husband.
No, thank you very much. It is your husband's birthday. Happy birthday. So that brings us to agenda item 7, the superintendent's report. So Superintendent Kilkeen, the floor is yours.
The first part of the report, I'm going to give the floor to the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Elizabeth. Melissa. I've changed your name, so.
Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Santa Claus. Very nice to see all of you. One of the requests, it's okay, Jim. It's been a long day for everybody. One of the requests was to do an update for some data. I know Jim has some specifics for others, but I will present the data. One of the pieces of data we were going to do now, and then spoiler alert, Jim will let you know the plans for the upcoming data.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is some of the social emotional data that we have provided for you before, but it's updated. It has fall and then winter. One of the reasons that Jim will probably explain to you as to why we didn't present the spring on here yet is because the schools and their leadership teams will be doing that. And so that will be a piece of our report card that he'll tell you when we'll be doing the all-inclusive, all of the data for updating for you. So one of the, again, this is for only the SVUESD schools. And one of the pages has what's called external behaviors. So if you go to the side on the bold that says external behaviors first. We work with the University of Kansas with a vetted screener called the SRSSIE. It is the Systematic Risk Screening Scale, and it's for internalizing and externalizing behaviors. Examples of some externalizing behaviors would be a negative attitude, cheating, and behavioral problems. In order to screen in a way that we see that, you have to actually see it. You can't just hear about it. And we provide training for people to do the screeners, and we do the screeners 3 times a year. And so what you see here, again, is the externalizing behaviors for the fall and for the winter. I want to note a couple of things. Total screens have improved and increased. And we see that across the board with all of our assessments and all of our screeners. The number of assessments and screeners that are actually getting completed has returned to actually increase prior to COVID time, which says a lot about how our principals and teachers are running the buildings. They're getting the results so that they can make the decisions. So more students were screened in the winter, and you're going to find that when I present to you this spring, it's even higher number. So we keep on getting more and more kids of finding out this piece of data about them. And so you can see that the University of Kansas has it with high risk, moderate risk, and low risk. And again, you have the snapshot of the fall, and a snapshot of the winter percentages. If you flip it over, these are the internalizing behaviors. Again, from the same screener, but they parse out the different behaviors. Examples of internalizing behaviors would be if you observe a child being shy or withdrawn, anxious or lonely. And then there's the varying degrees of how much you would see. And that filters into what we see in the fall, high risk, moderate risk, or low risk, and then winter. We use this data as a piece of looking at attendance behavior, behavioral data, and academics, along with talking to the teachers and their professional opinions about what we can do best for children. So this is your one update, and then I would have Jim, if you want to give a blurb of answering when the spoiler alert, when you're going to see me next with a lot more, but I'll take a lot more of your time.
Well, it's going to be in the fall. We did it last year in September, September 13th, actually. And then again, social emotional data was presented November 15th of 2022. So the annual report card, board presentations, they occur early in the fall to align with the release of the state level data and to support the decision making we do for the budget process. So as Melissa said, she'll be back with those snapshots for the academic performance in the fall. Just as a reminder, the state testing platform shifted this past winter from the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, SBAC, you've heard us use that term, to Cognian, is that?
VTech,
VTech.
Vermont Tech, VTCAP.
All right, I don't know why I had Cognian in here.
I'll tell them all about it when it comes up.
Okay, all right. So, but the first round of data is projected to be released late summer, early fall.
That's what they're telling us,
Yeah.
yes.
And we do not have any word on the last round of SBAC results taken by our learners in the spring of 22.
I check it weekly and I checked it prior to this meeting. It is still not updated on their site yet. But we do have it.
I'm sorry. Spring of 2022, not 23. So more than a year ago.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. They haven't posted the results for more than a year.
Public. We have them privately and they are used on leadership teams just as the fall, winter, and spring snapshots across the board are being used right now within the schools at their leadership teams to plan both for transitioning students going to the next grade and also to make recommendations for what they would need to do for interventions, both enrichment or otherwise.
Are there any additional SRSS population risk proportions that can be compared to besides fall 2020, like in fall 2023?
You will also, when I provide the report card in this coming up fall, you'll see fall, winter, and spring. So you'll see a snapshot of this entire school year.
There's more, we give a report on the map testing.
Yes, this is just one slice. I apologize. It'll be a comprehensive look across the board at assessment and benchmarking results.
We've had the opportunity to compare the MAP scores against your BCAP scores to see. Because for me, I think that one test out of the year is a little difficult to measure a student's progression as opposed to the MAPs where you give the test 3 times a year.
So with the SBACs, and I know you know because you were principal at the time, there was an actual research-based study that aligned MAP scores with SBAC. And so we could do the comparisons because we relied on that research studies to say they were like that. We do not have that yet with VTCAP to know that there is direct alignment. We, of course, will be looking at them on our digital dashboard that was created within the district. It has for each student across the board their yearly annual Vermont score, along with their MAPS, their most recent MAP score, along with their attendance, along with their SSRE. It's a comprehensive view for that child across the board. So by child and by class, it happens anyway because we have that entire dashboard that would show that. for a student or a group of students, but comparatively, we are waiting to see a study.
And does this line up with the SVUESD?
In what way?
Is it two different dashboards?
The Swiss data is on the same dashboard that I'm speaking of, comprehensive. And I would say that there is a definite correlation with both attendance and Swiss data.
Thank you.
Yep, I would say that you could make that case.
I do want to say to Melissa that I do think that what you've been supporting is also school-based teams to make
Absolutely.
Reporting, so we can have a more robust report to use school-based team to increase participation.
Yes. So we're working with them to do that. Both right now, they're looking at all of those results, and then they will be here when I give my really big show next fall.
Director Sutcliffe, do you have a sense as to when in the fall you will have the data you will need to report back?
So don't spoil it for me. Let's see if I remember. I believe that they've told us that grades 3 through 8 would be ready August 17th, but grades 9, due to how they roll it out, would not be ready until September. And now I don't know any drill.
So it's, my record shows that you presented on 9/13 22, so.
So September, we can anticipate something in
Oh,
September.
yes, sir. Absolutely.
And are you anticipating, is there a study being done right now to see if there is alignment between with the new test? And the way that there was a study that showed, yes, these two measures are comparable. Is there such a study being done right now?
I've asked Danielle Dupuis, who heads the Vermont AOE assessment. She took it over midterm when this was all being rolled out last February. I've asked that specific question several times now, and I'm being told to wait and see. But I've also been asked if I would be on a committee to give our feedback about the VidCap, and that's going to be part of my recommendation in there that we need that. So I will keep on advocating for that.
And I think this is a question for the superintendent. So understanding that large scale data has not been released publicly, could executive session, it's my understanding of executive session that one of the reasons we can enter into executive session is talk about information that does not constitute public record. So could this board use executive session to get some of the information that the leadership teams are able to use? So we have a more timely sense of how these things are done in schools.
I'd have to consider that, get back to you on what, I'm not an expert on executive session and student records versus what the state, when they say it's not public. I don't know if they consider, or you're not licensed professionals, so.
Right, yeah.
So, and I don't mean it that you're not qualified, it's that like, if we release that information, if someone we're not supposed to release it to, they can go after a license to be an educator.
But the state
They don't have that. So I can't sit here tonight and tell you whether that would work.
If we can maybe get some legal advice on that as well.
But I think the state released preliminary, findings of SVACs this year in January, but it's just like a big blanket.
It's huge, yeah.
It's
The state level,
yeah,
which I
state
know
level,
when it's-
this
when I'm
work,
given,
the whole
I
state.
know you want what's going on locally.
Right.
I understand.
And
I
you can break that down anyways, you go to the state website once they release it.
Once they release it,
And then it's just, look at the data, anybody in the community could piece it together if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
That's-
it should, once it's released, should be fair game to discuss in public.
But we can anticipate not our next meeting, but the meeting following, the board meeting following, based on September. Okay.
You have a question, what is the baseline that this is being compared to?
in what way? I'm so sorry.
For utilizing and externalizing behaviors, what's the baseline?
So what I can give you want to know the cut scores, correct? Yeah, I can provide the cut scores for you. Absolutely.
So if we understand that the SVACs or the kneecaps or whatever we're going to call them this year line up somewhat with the MAP scores, let's redirect. Can we get some information on the MAP scores to see where we are versus growth?
The MAP scores with growth will also be included in
In
the
the-
comprehensive report in
But
the
if
fall.
if it's embargoed and we aren't able yet.
Well, I think anything's gonna be embargoed by September, we'll be able to
Yeah.
have that full
Yeah, that
report by
was great.
September.
Yeah, the full comprehensive, we're ready to get back on track. We want to get back to where we were, where you were when Dr. Lee would present.
Yeah, I would say, between COVID and massive changes of personnel at AOE and a shift in the testing platform has had its impact.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, you said to give school choice during the principal or principal not here. I could address that now, right? So, this is what I have. I have all the applications for school choice coming in, right? The issue is Shaftesbury. I have 4 students on a waiting list to go to Shaftesbury kindergarten who are within the district. And I have 2 on a waiting list from outside the district. And the class is already full. And the sibling preference is not anything that this board ever approved. And when we did inter-school choice, and there was a debate at this board, and I know there's a lot of new members, so that's why going over this, that if you gave a preference when it's full, so we have to go to a lottery, and if you gave a preference, the quote at the time, not from me, was that's like winning the lottery twice. And I understand why we want to keep siblings in the school, but the board made the decision that that would be an unfair advantage to anybody else who's on that waiting list. Doesn't mean that the board can't vote and change the rules, but there's nothing in it that was debated. So short of hiring another kindergarten teacher and finding a room to put it in Shaftesbury, which doesn't exist, I don't know what your options are. And there is also, and I don't want to, I'm in a public meeting, so I don't want to give too much student data, but there's a similar situation of a family that is in district that has a sibling there, and they were denied entrance into Shaftesbury Elementary School. So that's where I'm saying, I mean, what could the board do? You could say you're gonna put 25 kids in a kindergarten class at Shaftesbury Elementary School. You could find, it's not gonna be that high, but
I was gonna add,
there are 15 there right now. That's your kindergarten class size is 15.
is there 2 classes or one?
One. Or is it 2?
There's
2. 2.
2 in checks.
2. 2 is one.
15 and 17, I think I heard.
Yeah. We don't have the.
So sorry, can we just back up and explore what or talk what the options for the board are? I mean, aside from another room.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the class size numbers, right? They're not etched in stone, right? They're recommendations by the education quality standards, right? So
And that number is recommended to be 15?
for that grade
for
level, and then it
kindergarten.
goes 20 for the other grade levels.
Yes.
So,
But if I remember, I think Molly Stark was in the 20s this year.
Yeah.
So I mean, we
Which
can't-
we all admit is not ideal.
Right. So I mean, I think the big picture is when we did the Act 46, we talked about, this inter-school choice, when we merged as what's the best option for teachers and, these sending districts. I think the Bennington piece came up later on. Because if you have a teacher in a building, have given the school choice, it makes their life easier. If you're a teacher in Shaftesbury and you live in Bennington, you bring your kid to work with you, it makes it easier. So
there is no preference for that either.
Yeah.
So just.
I know we talked about it as an option, we ready to talk. I think the same thing with, if you have a sibling in school to bring them with you was ideal for that. Because, you can't run around with 2 people. And I think Scott could probably talk to having 2 kids in 2 different buildings, it's the out.
If I could ask a question, just because I am one of the new board members, it's referenced, is there an AOE directive on this as to a maximum class size for kindergarten?
That's what the education quality standards are.
Okay.
Recommend 15. Thank you.
So the ideal recommendation is 15, but in other schools, that's not the case.
And to clarify, that's 15 without help.
Without help.
Right, but you say it's, the number's higher in other schools. It would be higher in Shaftesbury too. If somebody moves into Shaftesbury tomorrow, we would have no choice.
To accommodate.
They're coming to school.
Conversely, someone could move out.
Yeah.
Somebody can move out, and that's why I have this list.
Yeah. So what is the process for dealing with we've got, I think the main issue for me right now is we've gotten ourselves into, so first off, it was new for the district when we were going through the whole process of becoming a merged district and what would be the benefits of that. We were looking for, I remember, we were looking for ways to make it pay for the region and not necessarily, when I say pay, be a benefit to the region and not necessarily take away from one school or another, which was how everybody had been viewing the act at the time, was that it was just taking away. And we were as a board saying, how can we make it be something that's additive? One of the ways. So understanding that it probably wasn't perfect the way it was set up, and also understanding that there's an issue right now that I'm hearing there's two families that are going to have elementary age kids, which is different than my situation that you just referenced, Jeff, because one's in elementary and one's a middle schooler. You got a lot of leeway there. Two families that have elementary age kids that are going to be going potentially to two different buildings on the exact same schedule. Whoa.
Yeah.
So how do we as a board, can we as a board address that situation without also understanding it looks like you've got a bunch of other things there and we don't want to be disrespectful to the other applicants that are there.
Right.
The whole lottery thing. I thought that the question, the comment about the lottery was not that the person won it twice as being like a bad, like a, it's the negative, it's that they won it, like, okay, so you got another person in there, you won the lottery again, you got the first one, I didn't.
And the guidance this board gave, it gave no preference to, because staff was a preference talked about and sibling preference talked about, but the board did not come to an agreement on either one, or didn't approve either one.
I thought there was a draft memo that was written at one point. I
There
remember
was a
seeing
draft with it at one point, but
I
it
remember
didn't.
seeing it with the first year that had sibling preference as a, the top piece.
I think it was part of the proposal, but not, it was never enacted.
So it'd be my opinion as a board member to allow for the sibling, to make every provision possible to allow for if you've got two siblings of elementary age, to get them in the same building. But I don't know the pathway for our getting there.
Yeah. And then I have to ask the board that, what's the preference from in the district and outside of the district?
Once they're in, once one of those two siblings is in, I don't think it.
So if you have
for me, it
four
doesn't
people
matter.
from
Bennington.
Bennington, Pownell, that Woodford, somewhere else in SU were on this waiting list, your preference would be that they would get bumped, because you'll probably have those 4 here next week or at the next meeting, right?
But they also have a school they can attend. Or if you take somebody from Sandgate, where there is no school.
Yeah.
If their parents work in Pownell, and they want to send to Pownell, what's the option there?
Right.
If we can't accommodate them, then does that mean teacher? Who might look someplace else? Because if you live in Bennington, there's a school for you, there's a kindergarten class for you. If you're from a sending school or, a district without a school, then what are your options?
So I think what might be helpful in structuring this conversation is I think that from what I can tell, there are sort of three factors in play here. There is, I'm going to give what I think is the easy one first, whether or not preference should be given to teachers in schools. Then there's the question of should preference be given to sibling groups? And then the question of whether or not we give preference to families that already live within the district versus those families who live outside of the district. Are there, Sandy, just a second, are there any other, so those are.
Class size. You know, that's class size.
Well, I think class size is the thing that trumps it all.
Yeah.
I think class. I don't know that we should be pushing the envelope in terms of what the recommendation for best practices for a group of students to accommodate another student or another few students. So in my view, class size is the determining factor of how many students can come into a school. But any other factors that are on the table here that we're discussing?
I do want to get, if we're going to go down the path of class size, I want to get clarity. It's 15 with one teacher. For one,
Well, the
for kindergarten, what is it? Is it also 15 if you have a teacher and a para? Is it 17 if you have a teacher? Is it 19 if you have a teacher?
I don't have that in front of me tonight.
I think that's an important part of the.
How many schools have 15, more than 15 currently? How many classrooms do we have currently that have more than 15?
I don't have that in front of me.
So
I don't want to sit here and guess.
Yeah.
Because I know, because we don't have the enrollment form.
Yes.
But let's go back to the example that you brought up, if that another 5 families moved into Shasberry, we'd be faced with needing to accommodate them.
Correct.
What would we do?
We would accommodate them. That's just what we would do. So when families move into Shasberry, there is no choice. This board doesn't have a choice. We accommodate that. The question is, when we have a choice, what are we going to
pick up 2 per summer? You know, that's, I wouldn't bet on it, but you know, it's not unusual for us to see it. Sure. We all could lose 2, but you know, that's, I don't know that either.
The equation.
Same thing, remember, it's North Bennington are also locked into the SVSU through MAU. And so we have to provide special ed services and they're eventually be sent to MAU. So, you know, we're saying they're not part of the district, but they are kind of folded into the same district because the community, it's just North Bennington does not have a public school.
Very nice here, when we talk about access.
So in terms of those factors, the one that I think maybe we don't need to spend much time at all to talk about is whether or not preference is given to teachers. The conversation at the time was that could be seen as a job perk, as part of the benefit, right? Which is a thing that technically should be bargained by the union. It's not a benefit that extends to all teachers. So we kind of took that off the table.
The other reason why that went out the window is because you have staff who live out of state. And if we accepted their student, their child, and they were eligible for an IEP, the state of Vermont would not pay if they lived out of state. And our attorney advised us at the time, you couldn't say for a staff member that if you live in state, you can bring your kid,
right,
but if you don't live in state, you can't. So I think that was the other thing that killed that.
Right. So, okay, so definitely. So then that leaves us with a question of, do we give preference to sibling groups? And do we give preference to in-district families, or do we not want to take where they live into account? My own sense, I'll tackle the second part of that first, is that I think the preference has to be given to in-district families. Those are families who live here, right? And you're our neighbors, you know, Sarah and Andy, you're our neighbors, but you live in that other school district. And so I think and again, this is one board member's opinion. If other board members have different opinions, weigh in. But I think that's where the preference has to go. With that said, I do think giving preference to sibling groups is something that we should revisit anyway, because Andy, you shared some research. I'm sure there's other research out there that we can use to inform our decision, which I don't think was.
It's not a decision that anyone's happy with.
No, not at all.
In my feeling is, if we know there's a siblings, we know, you know, sadly, if they have a kid in first grade or kindergarten, they have a second kid who's 4 years behind, we know that kid's coming up through.
Sure.
So theoretically, we can plan for this.
Yep.
You know, the interim within district, you can't plan for.
Right.
You know, somebody goes to, you know, in Bennington, so I don't like, you know, living downtown, over the kid to go to Penn Hill, they send them to another school. You know, before that wasn't an option.
Yeah.
You know, you stayed in Bennington.
Right.
So I mean, really, school choice got preferential over Bennington prior to the merger. So I mean, I think that's,
I think that Scott brought up a really good point as well, that many years ago, every kindergarten teacher had someone in the classroom that was for all students to support that kindergarten teacher because the class sizes were so much larger. So considering that perhaps that could be something, perhaps a para or an assistant of some kind.
There is a para in all the kindergarten classes.
It's, okay.
And not, then there may be more if there's one dictated by an IEP, but the kindergarten staff.
Okay.
Paid by local budget, not the issue.
They are in the SU, but we directly assess them.
Yeah, because remember, they all came in by contract into the SU as SU employees. They're not paid by special education.
My misunderstanding, I thought it was only.
Can I just build on what Chris, you just said? I feel like it should be preference for in-district students. Unless one is already in that is considered out of district. And I know that we're the ESD and I know the buildings that it encompasses, but like you say, North Bennington neighbor, within the same SU, I have a hard time getting my head around, well, they're not in our district. It's unfortunate.
It doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good.
and they're Shaftesbury residents.
And they're Shaftesbury residents.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Shaftesbury ID district, which they pay their school taxes to North Bennington. It's that weird little, yeah.
And we were given school choice because of it.
And it's, I mean, if you look at that map, you could be Shaftesbury School. Glenn literally could be North Bennington Central District. The next house is Shaftesbury School.
Yeah.
But the way down in North Bennington on Cold Spring Road is Shaftesbury School. But the one closest to Shaftesbury on the other side is North Bennington.
We aren't going to get those lines redrawn.
Yes.
And there was I don't want to say battle, but definitely a discussion.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, a few years ago about bringing the ID district back into Shaftesbury School District, which would have been a significant revenue loss for North Bennington. So there was, some actions upstate and legal maneuvering on both sides had attorneys, and I was.
So are we allowed to act tonight?
No.
Or does it have to? Okay,
Yeah,
so it has to
warrant
be.
on an agenda. You have,
So,
this
and I
isn't
think
on there.
part of it is you hear from the people who buy in the districts of Shaftesbury. Now, some people don't know if they're going to Shaftesbury School or North Bennington School. It depends on where you buy your house. You go, oh, there's a house in Shaftesbury in Parent Acres. This is a nice place. I'm in Shaftesbury. Then you get told, when you have kids years later, oh, your kids go to North Bennington or you have school choice. Some people don't know that in the area. Which is tough because you look at, schools, I moved to Shaftesbury when somebody came to Shaftesbury, but then you find out there's this little funny clause in there.
But I do see on just about every real estate listing, it says what the school district is, so I would think.
Educated
Yeah.
buyers gonna look at that.
And for everyone that might be surprised by that, there are those that want that because they want the school choice option, right? So.
But I think just to go back to something you mentioned, I think we can talk about it because we amended the agenda prior to the
If you're
agenda.
gonna take a vote that changes something, I would strongly recommend you don't take that action on something that wasn't specifically warned on an agenda.
So this, fair enough. So one of the things that I recommend that this board do is we have the SVSU policies, but we do have the ability to draft specific policy for our district. And I think that's a step we need to take. And we should ensconce all of this and all these options and all these ifs and all these suggestions into a policy that people can access from the website. They can also include grounds for appeal, how an appeal will be, like everything that we're encountering here. Yeah, everything that's Sarah and Andy have highlighted about flaws in how this went out and how this was conceived years ago, right? Before any of it was really put into practice. This was a question that this board I don't know how many people.
Well, it was the board's first attempt at it, right? So there's always modifications to things as we learn and go on, so it's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think this one could take on a life of its own and be a single agenda item and provide for public comment again, because I see how the community rallied around the other issue tonight. I think this would generate the same sort of interest. So I would look to make that a single.
But in the interim,
Maybe if it comes out of the policy committee, that way you'd advise best there, but.
so we're looking at not having a meeting next month.
You usually don't meet in July.
We usually don't meet in July, which puts us into August, which
is right around
does
the
not
time.
give
for-
closure
Yep.
or planning for at least two families that would be heavily impacted by this decision.
And I would recommend that we also discuss this with our attorney.
Yeah.
Any changes, because she was involved in the original drafting of this.
So if we, and I'm sorry, Scott, I missed part of what you were saying.
I said we're in a
Yeah.
spot because we don't meet next month, which
And
puts
these
us,
families in limbo.
first conversation is August.
Yeah, which I don't want.
No.
But it's also, no matter what you decide, the first question is what's the class size, right?
Yep.
Well, no, the first question is, what is the acceptable class size?
Yeah.
Not what is the class size gonna be? What's the acceptable class size? What's established across our district?
What additional?
And what is
What additional
established
supports
by
and what-
the state if you have a single teacher or a teacher with a para? What's this? So there's more numbers there than
Yeah.
just to throw an arbitrary 15 out.
Then when we dive in, then what will that look like for the transition of the next year?
And what's it look like for schools that already have more than
Mm-hmm.
20 kids in the class, right? Yeah, I know we
want to
have,
add the facility piece because I believe the state also has a size per student.
Square footage per
yeah, square footage.
recommendation,
Yes.
but it's there.
Can't stop
Yeah.
people from having
And so
kids.
I can envision our policy addressing all of those things.
Can't stop it.
But I think the situation that we have here today still has a family that does not technically live within the SVUESD, hoping to get a preference above families that are also waiting, are also who live within the SVUESD. It's a matter of a couple blocks, but like it is what it is. The lines are what they are.
You're looking at potentially 6 additional students.
No, we're not.
Because they have to appeal.
They have
If
to.
we say that the process is the siblings, we're looking at 2 additions.
2 additional.
For me, the issue at hand right now is the fact that
So,
we've got.
and this is where I feel you put me in an awkward spot here, but that's right. This is where I say we shouldn't be talking in isolation. We need to have a return because you set the rules for this school year. People apply and comply for this school year. So if you change something right as you're going into that school year, like would that have affected who would have actually applied, right?
Sure.
You know, we set the rules for the rules were in place for the 23-24 school year. And then if you're gonna change them 2 months before, I'd be more comfortable we talk to our attorney before we do that.
Have we accepted any kids through school choice from Bennington, Shasberry?
Ask that again, please, Joe.
Have we accepted any children from other districts in the Shasberry for kindergarten?
This year?
This year?
This year?
No. I mean, from the supervisor, the Union Elementary District into Shasberry, yes, you did. You did.
And we have a policy that says that it's the preference.
No, we don't have policy. We have
So-
decision from the board.
Basically, we're as a board, somebody's accepting students without policy in place. And for me, I think that's the tricky point.
Well, you put a procedure in place, you don't have a policy.
But where's that procedure?
Right, yeah, right now, the procedure sits in the minutes of that meeting and it just sort of informs practice moving forward, which is why I think one thing that should come of this process is establishing a clear policy that anyone can find when they go on.
The application is pretty much, it's on the website.
And I believe our superintendent is correct that we have so many pieces that we need to think about.
And I also recognize that this family is waiting for a decision.
Well-
So is there a balance between the two, and is there a possibility of meeting again sometime in June before? I don't know the answer to that, so that they have some type of direction.
I mean, I think it's, I'm sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, especially like, you know, this family's in limbo with enrollment and deciding like where one kid goes, where the other kid goes, who's doing what, who's doing this. And so, you know, that family is pretty much, or any family, they're just stuck. And so with enrollment, you know, you have to submit paperwork by a certain amount of time. So what would the family, like, I'm just thinking of the families, or if I was in that position, what would the families be able to submit during enrollment to say, hey, we don't know? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because those packets need to be in by August. So that's just, that way we can have accurate enrollment numbers.
I hate to say it, we have a policy, and there's a policy listed on our website. Policy takes precedent over procedure, I believe. And so we have to follow the course of the policy, even if it's invalid, it's still listed.
That's the one for Shaftesbury specifically. So my issue with the one from Shaftesbury is that it is a policy written for a school district that no longer exists.
But it's still on the website.
It may still be on the website.
But we never got rid of it.
No, it was gotten rid of because it
Went
doesn't
away
exist
when
anymore.
I
when
can
the
pull
school.
up, I can pull
But
up.
it's on the school
Right.
website.
Yeah.
It's on
That's-
Yeah, so
the website, so the question is, did it not get cleaned up? And if you're going to reference a policy that I can publicly pull up on the website, you can't tell me it's not there.
I'm not telling you it's not there, Jeff. I'm saying
So-
it applies to a school district that no longer exists.
But then it should be gone.
Sure. And I don't dispute that part at all.
And I mean, I think that's an issue that I don't want to deal with legally. I mean, if there's a policy on our website, I think we have to follow whatever.
But it's not, there is no Shaftesbury School District,
Yes.
is what I
Or
think.
then the
They're not a legal body anymore. Policy needs to go.
I mean, it should have gone 3 years ago.
Yes, it absolutely should have.
So I mean, like I said, you know, if you're going to cite a policy that's sitting here on our website, even though it's just Jasper School District, you know, I mean, what? I don't know, I think that's a sticky point for me. Is I mean, if it's there and I can use it in its appeal process, I think we have to follow that process.
If we were the Shaftesbury School District, but we're not. We
Because
are
the first thing-
Union Elementary School District. So
From a legality standpoint, someone representing them would sue the defunct or non-existent entity is what I think.
But where does it say that, you know, another kid from town has preference for inter-school choice? I mean, like, that's the tricky part, is where we make,
Totally agree with that piece.
somebody's making the decision to accept students in the school without the board's input. And I think that's, you know, if we have an application, we need to have procedure, and we need to have a policy.
Well, we do.
Absent of a policy,
Yeah.
which we know we need to have.
And I think
And
that's,
and I'm looking forward to being a part of, I do not want to lead it, just to be clear. Being a part of instructing where we can ask things or state things in a policy like no out of district students. But right now, what we're up against is a family that a family, regardless of the district that they're in, that has got 2 elementary age kids. And it wasn't that long ago that I had them, so maybe I'm just remembering but that would need to be in 2 different buildings at the exact same times. Just about impossible to make happen. And so with that, I think we have to work with what the parameters that we're in right now, and then we can use everything that we've learned through this process to make one heck of a policy.
And I would hope that you
To
guys
guide us as we go
understand
forward.
we're emphatic to your plea here, because that's why, I mean, we're spending a great deal of time thinking about this and committing to additional time. It's got to be figured out, but there's a process by which it's got to happen.
Yeah, no, we understand. So how about this, in terms of next steps? Let's, within the next week and a half, have a conversation with Dina, the lawyer, to have her weigh in on the very specific question the superintendent brought up, which is, can we change the rules? Is it legally advisable to change the rules right now, given that such a rule change may have influenced who would have applied in the first place, and what do we do? If Dina says that, no, that's okay, we can go ahead and do that, then I would be in favor of holding another meeting the end of this month, specifically warned with this as the only agenda item for the board to have a conversation with some legal input. Some of it might have to be done in executive session because we'll be getting legal input. But then to make public any changes in the procedures that's already been established. And then sometime,
I have the procedure, there is a written internal document procedure based on what, it's 4 points, the process it's called.
okay, so we have,
How
and
have the
then,
rules changed?
and, well, let me just finish this thought, and then I heard Christelle first, and then Scott. So talk to Dina, hold another meeting at the end of June. And then in the fall and winter time in the closing months of 2023, we begin work on building policy around this for the next school year. I think that's the way for us to move forward from where we are today. That's my thought. Let me just, Christelle, I heard your voice first, please.
I just had a question, or I'm looking for clarification, so there's an internal way to access, but you need special permission versus having public information? That's where I'm kind of,
I don't know what you're.
Say that again.
Yeah.
so you just said something about internal.
I have my guidance for when
That's where I'm confused.
Yeah, me too. I have my guidance from whatever the board, whenever this happened, it's a document that I don't think it's on the website. The policy, the application is on the website, but this is titled SVUESD, Interschool Choice Eligibility. And it talks, there's 4 steps to the process, and it gives deadlines of when we notify parents and things like that. So I can certainly, it's not secret. I can certainly share it. Is it on the website? I don't know.
Okay.
I know you find this amazing, but I don't know every document that's on the website. Just like I don't know every word, of every policy.
Really?
You know.
So noted.
Please put it in my evaluation. You know? So,
You know, and that's why I think.
it's not policy, it's a process.
Process.
So we gotta be careful how we use it. Policy is voted on by the SU, and there are policies that are specific to just some school districts, so that's okay. And you saw tonight, like what the process is to get a policy change or a procedure change, you could vote it.
And I think that's where my question is I don't necessarily, and I would love the dialogue, and I don't necessarily understand how the rules have changed when there is no policy to establish rules.
So
Or
what rule
procedure.
changed though?
Well, that's what we're talking about, going and asking our attorney.
Yeah.
If our making a reasonable accommodation for a family is a rule change.
Right, because you have, my concern is you got 4 other people on the list that are waiting to get in too. So if you've changed something that now is, because look what happened. Say there's 2 people that leave over the summer, now there's 2 open in Shasbury. The next 2 people that would go onto the list is not them. It would go to the 2 people that are in the school district. Yeah. So if you allow them to have the seat, and now only 1 will get in, what will that other person do? That's what I mean. That's what I want to talk to the attorney. Are we opening yourself up for any type of legal action because you changed the rules we're playing by in the middle of the game? But we had no rules.
But there weren't rules. They were.
Is there,
In the tuition in policy, the policy to tuition in
I
students.
think that only applies to MAU, wasn't that only, or was that school choice MAU? I don't know. We're going
Cross-reference.
all over the place here,
Okay.
so.
So I think that's what I'd like. I'd like to get some kind of guidance, whether we call it a rule change, whether we call it just talking to our lawyer because it's a smart thing to do. But
And
I'd
I
like,
think, and then I also think you would need to announce it. We'd have to let these other parents know that you might be changing something.
yeah, I think first step though is to have a conversation with Dina in the next, it's already been.
Dina is our attorney, if you keep
Yeah,
it
Dina is our attorney.
a single name, so.
And then hold a special meeting specifically with this is we'll have public comments, need to do that too, but have 2 agenda items, public comments and discussion of this. this being, what do we do with the requests that we have for this school year entering in Shaftesbury? That's this to be discussed. And then we'll convene a policy subcommittee to build actual policy around this.
Critical to that will be an understanding of square footage per student or class size with a teacher versus with a para, because if at the end of the day, we can get through all this and it may be a touch bigger than we want, but we have only one extra above the guideline or under the guideline,
And I
then it's a
usually,
non-issue.
let's throw a meeting on at the end of June, right?
Yes.
I have two meetings next week. I have SU on Tuesday, I got MAU Wednesday with all their agenda items. So how much time am I gonna have to put together what you want for this meeting? And I understand the urgency, I just want you to understand the situation from what I'm, Dean is always very responsive, you know, but,
I think Renee said she wanted to do it. I think I just looking.
Tina's backed up because I'm waiting on stuff from her too.
and I will have to attend remotely, but that's not a problem.
So
So you tentatively looking at Tuesday of that week, what's that, the 27th?
the 27th. Let's I mean, one of the things that, so the members of the board, even though we can't have big wide conversation via email because it violates open meeting law, we can have email conversation about scheduling meetings. So maybe that's, instead of finding a time tonight, let's use email to figure out when we might be able to meet at the town of the gym.
And if it would help the superintendent, and I don't know that it does or doesn't, but if it is just the two items on the agenda, perhaps more people could be remote and it could be during the day if that was easier for the board and for the superintendent.
I think, I don't think we say no to any possibilities right now. I think we figure out what's gonna work best. Okay. So,
And we'll have better information, we'll have accurate class sizes. And more detailed information on like what else is at play here.
yes. Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, anything else for the superintendent's report?
Yeah, the other, SROs.
Yes.
So the chair described it accurately at that part of the meeting. We have had no discussion about starting safety teams like the high school uses. Has it been suggested? Sure, but we've had no formal discussion about it. The board hasn't had any discussion about it. That mirrors what the high school has. They don't have, they have like a police detail from the Bennington Police occasionally when one is available. Let me back up about the SROs. The elementary schools never had them. The middle school has had one for a long time. And the high school had, and Southwest Tech used Bennington Police for details in the school. It was Scott who made the original motion for SROs, and I think it was after a tragedy at another school in another part of the country, in fact, about bringing them in. But I could be correct that it wasn't you, but I thought it was.
I might have seconded. I think it might have been Tony.
It might have been Tony. Might have been Tony. Okay, a Shaftesbury guy. So it was planned for 5 SROs. Bennington Police would provide at the 3 Bennington schools and they would cover Monument and Woodford. That third officer would go between the 2 schools because it felt that full-time at Monument might not. The Sheriff's Department provided Pownell and Shaftesbury. Up until this year, Pownell had a deputy sheriff and Shaftesbury had a deputy sheriff. Deputy sheriff took a job at other facility out of state from Pownell and was never replaced by the sheriff, and he said he doesn't have the staff to do it. The money has been in the budget for multiple years for SROs. The money is no longer adequate because even though originally it was put in like $295,000, it wouldn't support those at every school, because even though Renee kept that line item in the budget, we didn't add a percentage increase to every year to show what inflation would be. So we did get a formal letter of increase from the deputy sheriff, from the sheriff, that the rate would go from $45 an hour to $65 an hour. HR calculated for me that would be over approaching $95,000 a year for one SRO out of your $295,000. So the question before the board is, do you want to pay the higher rate? Can you afford it? Yes, but you'll, from that $295,000 line item. But where's the equity if you don't have it in any of your other schools? And I would offer, and you even heard it from some of the audience members, that if you could only have one SRO, you only have one available from the local law enforcement agencies, would you put them in Shasberry? Or would you put them, Bennington Elementary School, Molly Stark? Or because you don't have one for everybody, do you make the decision not to have an SRO? So I want to think about that too.
Is there, in the sheriff's request for the increase, two questions. One, is there an explanation as to why such a steep increase? And two, is there a deadline that we need to answer that by?
I don't know about, the explanation was that's the new going rate, and the schools that take that SRO if we don't want them at that rate.
Okay.
And I want to clarify, because some of the things that we got from the emails were like, they thought we had already got rid of him because he wasn't there. He had been pulled onto a traffic detail from the sheriff, not from us. But they did inform the school that, he was going to be doing that. So it wasn't our doing that it disappeared like for 3 days last week. And everybody, at the same time that it was all over Facebook, so people made the conclusion that we had already made the decision. So he was working traffic somewhere. And that was always the problem, even with the SRO at the middle school, though he was I should say the middle school no longer has an SRO. He resigned from the Bennington Police and took a job at the high school. So again, I hear the Bennington Police is significantly down in there in staffing, and so is the sheriff. So it just is not the personnel to do it. Can we explore other options? Yeah, not tonight. I mean, sure. And I don't mean it in a flippant way. I just mean like, I'm not prepared to talk about what those other options are. I can certainly have something for your August meeting. I don't know what safety teams would look like in the elementary school. And what is that based on what one of you said, what the real purpose of an SRO is building relationships with students and not necessarily for safety. So, but the high school successfully has these safety teams, but it's a team. There's at least three. So, we're not going to put 3 team members in every elementary school. You certainly don't have enough money to do that. And you don't have enough money to do that in every school at $295,000 in your budget. Yeah.
So if I understand, I'm sorry, Chris.
No,
If I understand you correctly, the person that was in the elementary school or the middle school took a job at the high school?
Yes.
Doing something in a similar position?
Well, as a public employee, not as a law enforcement agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was in the middle school as the contracted Bennington Police SRO,
And
and
now,
they kept pulling him for duty. And I think then he positioned with the high school for security, so he resigned from the police department to take a
take that.
MAU position.
Right. So now we're employee MEU safety team.
So as we move forward on this decision, I'd love to hear what the middle school and high school have. Maybe they can do
The
an
middle school is
elementary
going to go to that safety model, but I don't want to, I hadn't put enough preparation to discuss what that, what that would look like and what that recommendation would be, but it's just, so Renee, you got the invoice from the sheriff. Did he give a deadline for when? I mean, the rate increases for the start of next school year, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
it would be. And there is a discrepancy a little bit too, though, in that our contract for this year is actually at a higher rate than what they're billing us at.
Yeah.
So it's really a 25% increase.
So there was an
over the
increase
contract.
this year that they never went up to for whatever reason. There was 40, but we're only paying 45 and that's gonna.
Was that done like after the election, like a changeover, or
No,
just like?
it's the contract that we had in place
That
for
was the
this
contract
year.
in
They
place
just
with the previous sheriff, yeah.
So for under advisement, we should move on because we have executive sessions.
Yeah, and they have, I promised I would read this announcement, because Jonathan Phipps, the SVSU equity coordinator, has been putting a lot of work into this Saturday. Is our Juneteenth celebration. Juneteenth, short for June 19th, marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved peoples be freed. So this has become a focal point of celebration. So the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union and its local partners will collaborate and unite to host a public Juneteenth celebration and commemoration. It's going to be right out there on that lawn. There's tents going up, and the event is family friendly. It's free of charge. It's open to the public and educational and entertaining in its format. This effort is an opportunity to provide an open door to all of our community members so that they may learn about our nation's newest federal holiday, as well as the impact it has on our current times. This effort is a yearly occurrence, and we hope that it will foster a sense of cooperation between community members and organizations to facilitate equity and inclusion initiatives. It is this Saturday, June 17th, from noon to 3 p.m. at the SVSU Central Office, Tuttle Lot, which is what that is known at right there. Lot 113 Depot Street, Bennington Lot. That's Saturday, rain or shine, noon to 3. And I mean, there's probably more, but it's all that. Yeah. Good. Okay.
Well, thank you for that.
Can't just, no, you did, there was a question about field trips, right?
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
So I did policy 6230, I refer you to. It's boards only approve overnight trips or trips out of the contiguous 48 states. Those must be submitted by anything outside of the 48 states or overnight have to be submitted by the building principal to the board so that they can present to the board, and the principal presents to the board. So that's policy 6230, which is being followed. Question about school hours, right?
Yes.
Operating hours. Find my notes on that. Give me a sec. So the statute says that, the board, the state board and the school board shall fix the number of hours that shall constitute a school day, subject to change by the order of the state board. So as we outlined in the family newsletter of last August, and we'll do it again this August, we publish when all the school hours are, and I'll just state here. Molly Stark, their school day is 8 to 3, Monuments 8 to 3, Pommel 8 to 3, Woodford 7:30 to 2:30, Bennington Elementary 8 to 3, Shasbury Elementary 8 to 3. There's also nothing in that provision that would prevent the school board from adding additional days, because we do go 5 days over what the state requirement is, 175, except this year because we gave 2 snow days and we're only going to we'll do less than 180. I don't know if that answers everything that.
Can you tell us the statute that you just referred to?
I don't have the statute number there. I just said by statute, but
So
I can find that. Yeah.
1071B says that the school board shall fix the number of hours that shall constitute a school day. Is that the one you just cited?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I'm assuming you did it somewhere along the line, right? So.
No.
I don't recall when we did that, when it was brought to my attention by another board member.
But the school hours have not changed.
Yeah.
Right. So we're the last time the school hours changed was for Bennington, when we were still separate school districts, and the Bennington board, I don't know if you were on it then, when they reduced by the student day by half an hour to come in compliance with their rail.
Okay.
So at one point, Bennington the three Bennington schools went longer than everyone else, and that caused all kinds of, the common planning time changed that.
So let's plan, just to
Put it on
cross,
the agenda.
yeah, cross the T and dot the I. They've been announced, that's great. We will make it official in August. And it'll take 35 seconds of discussion.
That's everything on my list.
So we're at the 2 hour and 5 minute mark. We do still have executive session we need to do, which will be brief, but I would entertain a motion to move into executive session 5 minutes from now. To get folks.
Yes.
And so can I have a motion to that effect, please?
I first,
All right,
second,
can I have a second?
third,
Thank you,
whatever.
Mike. Any discussion about moving into executive session in 5 minutes?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? The motion carries, and that's it.